George of the jungle, strong as he can be.
I got good news for you, Bob. We only need 1 year of tax returns to get your file approved. But is that always good news? Welcome to thecreditjungle.com. This is George Anderson. Thanks for dropping in. And today, this is going to be the previous video or another one we did. We talked about an appraisal waiver. Not really. This one we're going to talk about an income waiver. Well, not really and not always. But for self-employed borrowers, even prior to the apocalypse back in 2006, 2007, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, well, Freddie Mac only had what was called a 1 year appraisal or 1 year income tax requirement, but you had to meet certain specifications for the business itself and things like that. And the reason that was kind of important is that, just to give you a ridiculous example, my business partner, not too many years ago, had a borrower who had, on his tax return for whatever year it was, had showed that he had made over $400,000 of income that year. However, the prior year he had made well into the seven figures. So he had made something like, $2 or $3 million. Well, the home that he was buying was only about the value of what he had actually made the previous year. It was like a $400,000 home, and yet he'd made $400,000. Well, under the strict 2 year requirement rule, if you had somebody that had declining income that was going down by more than 20%, he wasn't eligible. It's kind of silly stuff on there. Well, the poor guy went from making $2 million to $400,000. I mean, how is he going to be able to afford this house? So there have been, again, the pendulum is swinging a little bit, and it has been just a little bit for the last several years, making it a little bit easier to get credit for self-employed borrowers. And one of the things that has facilitated that most is a 1 year tax return requirement. So if you're only looking at 1 year, you don't know if the previous year was higher or lower. You don't know if there's a trend going up, trend going down. What we're doing is we're just taking a snapshot of that 1 year. We calculate what the income is, and if it's enough to qualify for the borrower, then we're just okay to do that. The caveat on there is that they want to see that the business has been in existence for 5 years or longer. So what do you typically do to do that? Well, if there's a corporation or an LLC, it will most of the time it will say right on the tax return, it will say date incorporated, and we can go by that. The other ways that we can do it in the state of Utah is we can go to the Division of Corporations, and we can see when that entity was created. And if it's been created for more than 5 years ago, then that's okay. Now, there's a couple of workarounds on that, and I actually, I think it was in the month of August or September, I can't remember, but I actually had 3 files in process simultaneously that all had the exact same scenario. It was where the borrower started out with a business that was a Schedule C, in other words, a sole proprietor, and they had had that operation going there for at least 3 years or maybe 4 years or longer. And then they flipped over from being a sole proprietor. They got a tax ID number, they incorporated, and then they had their business. Now, initially, the first underwriter that got this, not too familiar with this, a lot of underwriters are not self-employed, so they don't deal with this on a personal level. But when you provide the documentation along with an explanation, they all got it, and all 3 of these loans closed, and it was just fine. But you just show that it's the same business. It could have even been under a name change. Maybe he was doing, Bob's Drapes and Blinds or whatever like that, and he just did it in his name as a person, and then he added, LLC or changed the name or something like that. But if you can show that it's the same person, that it's the owner, that was the sole proprietor, and he's the same owner of the LLC, S Corp, C Corp, whatever that might be in there, well, you have this continuity that you can demonstrate over the 5 years, even though the entity itself might only be 1 year old. But this is a very important tool for self-employed borrowers because it really takes the heat off of every single year that you're self-employed. You always got to be making more money, more money, more money. We know that the business ebbs and flows and cycles, and heaven forbid that some guy go from making $2 million to $400,000 and finds himself in a position where he can't qualify for a modestly priced home based on his $400,000. This gets back to, again, some make sense underwriting coming back into play again. So hopefully that would help you and answer a few questions that you have. Anyway, remember, you can push button, Get Mortgage Professional. This is George Anderson at thecreditjungle.com, and I would love to answer your questions and help you with your situation. Have a great day.